cashier. Get the money like a cashier. Customer, clientele. I was broke, that was last year. Getting money like a cashier. Get the money like a cashier. Benjamin, nothing less. I was broke, that was last year. Don't change them. I never switched up. Been down since day one. Stay social. People change them.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Dope Black Thoughts Live. My name is Kevin Cox.
I'm Stefania.
How are you doing today, Stefania?
Man, I'm okay. It's been a long weekend already. We've had so much in the news cycle that, it's kind of, it's a little stressful.
I was going to say, it's hard being a Black person in 2021. It's always been hard.
Yeah, it's tiring. It really does weigh on you quite a bit. And it's something that you can't take off. So there's no relaxing.
Can't take off this skin, we got to keep on moving,
Mm-hmm.
keep on doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, so look, I just want to jump into a few stories because it's just you and me. We're good.
Yeah, we're going to do it.
I want to talk about how America, the community, the politically active community, all of us patriotic Americans, we say we support our troops. We say we're the most patriotic country in the world. We're the best, American exceptionalism.
Right.
And sometimes I kind of feel like it's unless you're Black, right?
Of course. It always has been that. They don't want to recognize that, but unless you're Black.
I mean, but seriously, it's not a joke to me. So this official resigned after cutting the mic on a Black officer at an American Legion ceremony. It's a Memorial Day ceremony. This is Memorial Day.
Mm-hmm.
Guys, we're respecting our troops. We're showing our respects to the people that have fallen in war, defending our country and our Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
And even when we're doing that, if you mention how Black freed slaves honored the fallen soldiers after the Civil War, they're going to cut your mic. So this is the American Legion in Ohio. You know anything about Ohio? You ever been out there?
I have been to Ohio, and I'm seeing more and more news cycles that come out is not very, it's not very nice. That concerns Ohio. I do want to say this though. It's amazing how they want to paint over history and make it something that it's not. History is history. It's the truth. And that's what we should be telling. Yep. And the veteran who was speaking, he was telling the truth.
Yep.
What's wrong with the truth?
I have no idea what's wrong with the truth. I mean, honestly, it's just hard. It's hard. We say we support. This is Black people that put their lives on the line for the country. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. This is the alpha male, the protector, the true American. I don't know what else you can do.
Right.
And even then, if you mention Black people, even
right.
then. So there's an exception to the rule. There's an asterisk to this policy, and that's unfortunate. I actually attempted to enlist twice. And I was not allowed in because I had too many injuries from football. So I have screws in both of my feet from injuries playing football. Mm-hmm. And they're like, you're not in physical condition to lay your life on the line for our country. And I was like, if I can make it in, even busted up and screwed back together, I would.
Right. Your heart was in the right place, though. I come from a long line of people who have served in the military. As a matter of fact, I have an active duty son-in-law right now who's in the Army. And I've said this several times. I've had this conversation with several white people who just don't want to hear it. They claim to be the biggest patriot of our country. They claim that my son was back when he played football, when Colin Kaepernick was kneeling for racial injustice. My son and several of his teammates took it upon themselves to kneel as well. And there was that big controversy about high school and college students kneeling. and places were trying to ban the kneeling. My son was one of the ones that did kneel, and there were tons of parents in the audience who would scream at him to stand up and yell at him that it's unpatriotic to kneel during the national anthem. And I thought, there's no bigger patriot than a Black man who fights for a country that hates him, and thinks of him as a second-class citizen who has laid down his blood, laid down his life for this country. My uncles were frontline Vietnam, came back messed up.
Yep.
And that was back when we did not treat our veterans very nice. We came back and they were taunted, they were treated terribly. So my uncles were part of that era, that they were treated terribly when they came back. They were harassed by the police when they came back. And yet they laid down their lives for the very people who treated them badly.
That's amazing. It was the animosity of the Black soldiers returning with pride and confidence that sparked the red summers of domestic terrorism. There's a large amount of even targeting of the Black community to get them in the position to lay down their lives.
Yeah.
They go to poverty-stricken communities, and that's going to be predominantly Black communities. But even also the poor white communities and the other minority communities. And I know where I was growing up in Baytown, Texas, there was only one job opportunity that would actually pay your bills, and that was ExxonMobil. If you did not get a job at ExxonMobil, you had to either drive an hour to an hour and a half away for a good paying job, or you worked one of these ones where you're just spinning your wheels for 10 years and you'll never leave and you'll never really just be prosperous. It's really tough because I was sacking groceries and a recruiter came up to me and just offered me the world.
Really?
And that's tough. I just think about how many people they see these opportunities and they're like, man, if this will get me out of the ghetto, this will get me out of the trailer park, if this will get me out of the meat packing plant, I'll do it. So you these ones that actually make it, and then they're in the American Legion and they're talking, like we're honoring fallen soldiers and talking about even freed slaves. Isn't that the American dream? You came from the bottom and you made it. You fought for your country. You survived, and then you honored your fallen comrades.
Right. The ones who fought side by side with you, laid down their lives with you.
And we don't even want to hear about it. What?
What's wrong with hearing about it?
I think it's history. It's because it's the truth of history. And you said a very interesting term. You called it whitewashing. There's a very, very incendiary incident that happened at the gallery for George Floyd. I'm gonna pull it up here. They let's see here, Black Wall Street. There you go.
The gallery for the Tulsa, Oklahoma massacre.
Yep. I apologize. I got a few things mixed up there. Yeah, the Black Wall Street gallery was vandalized in New York City, and they literally threw white paint. They literally threw white paint. They literally whitewashed it. It doesn't get any worse than that. We're saying it as a turn of phrase, and they literally did that.
Right. Again, another part of history that they find it hard to swallow. Like, it's history. It's what has happened. Why can't you confront history and let it be what it is?
It's amazing. We were neither shocked nor surprised that merely 3 days after opening on Mercer Street, in celebration of our ancestors, that we would find a literal whitewashing of Black Wall Street on our front window.
You have to ask yourself, well, how did we get here? How did we get here? Why is it that white people are so afraid of their own history?
And obviously, we're in the activist community, so we're around a lot of white people that are fully in tune with their history. There is a strong contingent of white people that are unwilling to bear witness to it and to recognize that it's true, such as when you talk about Native American catastrophe and genocide. Anything you talk about that actually just points a finger and shows some guilt. In the Black community, we're willing to embrace that there's a such thing as Black on Black crime, right? I recognize that Black on Black crime is a thing. Here's my question, though. how come we never heard the term white on white crime?
Which happens a lot.
White on white crime happens almost at the exact same level as black on black crime.
Actually, and statistics show that it happens more, but.
Well, I'm just saying we're around the same. There are crimes of, what do they call it? Crimes of just when you're close to people.
Right.
The people you're close to are the people that are most likely to fall victim to the crimes that you commit.
Mm-hmm.
So, whether or not people want to own up to it, everyone does it. But for some reason, black on black crime is the only one that is publicized and brought forth and talked about. And, that's white supremacy.
Right. That's all part of it. Hey there.
Now we have a special guest in the building. We have the honorable and well-respected, world-renowned Omar Montgomery.
World traveled.
I don't know if I deserve all those accolades, but it's good to be here with the team. How y'all doing today?
We're doing great, sir. Thank you for joining us.
No problem. It's always a pleasure.
Yes, sir. So, look, we were talking about the Tulsa, Oklahoma gallery being vandalized in New York City, literally being washed with white paint. What do you think about that?
A while back, I used this just sort of this phrase that when racism is threatened, the political party for racism is white supremacy. And that's not Republican, that's not Democrat, just white supremacy. Mm-hmm. And what ends up happening is that some of them can't just deal with the fact that there's a history with race. And how they take it out is going back to the old ways of the KKK, using terrorist acts to scare those who they're intimidated by, those who have been resilient and has outlasted white supremacy. So the only way they know how to do it is either to shoot up a church, terrorize people, try to take away your right to vote, or go vandalize things that mean something and that show what they did in the past was wrong.
Yeah. Something that uncovers, that unmasks their behavior, something that shows what they've done.
Yes.
Unmasking is a very pertinent, term, especially for nowadays. People are coming out of their masks and whatnot. Now it's like to see your true face.
Exactly. I say that literally and figuratively because, the hoods that they used to wear, they wear no longer. And now they feel emboldened to just say what they want to say, filming themselves. So unmask.
Absolutely. I mean, even that even affected the dating community. People are meeting somebody, think they look good, and they got the mask on, then the mask finally comes off. You're like, oh, hold on a second now. That's what's going on when they look in the mirror right now. When we bring history forward, and just being originally from Texas, they always have those battles for the textbooks where we want to think differently about slavery. We want to call them. What was the last one? World geography. They tried to sneak it into a world geography textbook. Wanted to call black slaves from Africa unpaid migrant workers.
Well, we have that same debate happening right here in Colorado. So this is a national trend where they're trying to rewrite history and at the same time trying to underscore and take away the work that's been done by people who have studied in this field since the 60s and 70s, that started Black studies, that started Latinx studies, that started gender studies and things of this nature. Now they're trying to take it away. Now more youth are being enlightened. That's why you saw the protests of 2020, because they are enlightened and they're learning the truth and they're grasping to learn more. And now there's these groups that's just threatened by that. And some of them, it's their kids.
Well, and they're wanting also to downplay and minimize their role in shaping this country. I mean, this country was shaped with racism. It was shaped with white supremacy, and they need to recognize that and move on. Now, until they can recognize that that's where we were, how do we move on to that and become something better and different?
Yes, and I want to highlight a term that Corey Thompson put into this comment, talking about the Reconstruction era being whitewashed, so they could plead ignorance thinking that it's social Darwinism that caused the current problems related to poverty. Just social Darwinism being what so much of our economy, so much of our society is built upon. And they're just like, hey, look, Black people, they're not making as much money. They're not getting good jobs, and they don't make as good a grades in school.
They're not educated. They drop out of high school. They drop out of high school at higher rates than any other race.
They keep dropping out. When the cops come, why do they run? As opposed to saying, this one cop just shot 3 people in the last 3 months, right? Or has 18 complaints, Chauvin. Like we're not gonna talk about the history of these people. I just want to try to write a pass for what happened right now and be like, well, we don't know the whole context. The video doesn't show everything. And why did he run? And why didn't he just comply? I think Black people have a tendency not to comply because we're meant to be figures of authority.
Well, the other part to this is when you started out talking about the Tulsa. There's an article in National Geographic I was reading while I was on the plane that talks about how much that land would be worth today, how much those families would be worth today if it was allowed to flourish, along with all the other communities that experienced insurrections that were predominantly Black from the late 1800s on up to about 1950. If those communities have been able to flourish, what would Black America look like today? Don't call us lazy. Think about what you did to minimize or retard the growth of Black America through your racist acts.
Yeah, don't build a mythology like MJ Carter put up here. Michael Carter, shout out to you. Don't keep on putting forth lies. I mean, I feel like even in school, just being on the school board, when our students are having disciplinary issues, probably because our education system is built towards designing workers, as opposed to designing business owners, designing, entrepreneurs, designing people that are going to be creative and creating new portions of industry. You're supposed to be a boss sometimes if you don't want to listen to people. Yes. Bill Gates dropped out, because he was like, no, I can do this a little bit better than what you're trying to teach me to do. And I don't think he's a bad student. I think he's actually one of the best students.
Right. They don't want to look at it like that when it comes to having Black and brown skin, though. I mean, I've always, in our school system is inundated with people. I don't want to say this the wrong way. I wish Hashim was here because
Hashim is the wordsmith. He's the wordsmith.
It's inundated with white people who want to teach Black people, but they're not interested in the Black life or the Black experience. And so when they see a Black, like you just hit on, Kevin, when they see a Black student acting out, they immediately want to kick him out, refer him to the resource officer instead of the counselor or the dean who's there to help them work through their problem and get to maybe an issue at home. Instead, they want to automatically label that child, put them in the system, throw them in the pipeline of school to prison, and throw them away. Now, if it was a white kid, he would be escorted out of the classroom. He would be taken to a dean. He would be coddled. Yeah. Where is that from the white teachers who are teaching the Black students? We don't have that. We need it.
Yeah, and let's keep it real. There's financial incentive for them to come to the schools where there are Black, predominantly Black communities. So I can't just say that these people are in the classroom with my students simply because they just love to educate and they're more interested in the plight or the struggle of the Black community. In many cases, they're like, I can get $3,000 to $5,000 this year if I go to this school in particular, and I'm just going to tune out, just whatever. If they raise their voice or they don't listen to what I say, I'm just kick them out of the class, as opposed to say, hey, you know what? How about you come up here and help me? Teachers used to do that. Oh, you're over here acting out. You're going to come up here and you're going to help me teach this lesson. You read this chapter out loud to them, and then you're going to pass out the papers and stuff like that. And that kid ain't throwing no more paper airplanes or shooting spitballs no more. Those are the sorts of things that used to happen quite a bit back in the days.
I don't have small children. I'm sorry, Omar, go ahead.
No, please go ahead. please, please.
No, I was going to say I don't have small children anymore, and I'm not on the school board, Kevin. What is the ratio of Blacks on the school board, number one? And number two, how are you feeling with your children in school? I know that they're not encountering teachers who are of color very often. So how are you feeling, and what are you seeing? I heard that they won't even test them when they see them acting out to see if they would test up to another grade level. Do you want to keep them right where they are?
Well, my kids aren't in Aurora Public Schools. They live with their mom. And this school district where they are is more impoverished, and they have much looser protocols. So it's kind of more, you have to find a more motivated member of the district that's going to be willing to push your kid along. If you don't respond to the one email or one phone call or something like that, or if you don't have the right attitude when they call you, or they call you at the wrong time, you miss it or whatever, it's very likely that student may fall through the cracks where they are. Here in APS, I believe we have a good department, for our Division of Equity and Learning. I think we do a good job of trying to bring as much equity as possible, because you asked about a composition of our school board. We're a majority Black school board with a Black superintendent, a Black chief academic officer, and we're very motivated. We've been creating a lot of programs. We put forth a resolution for the attainment and retention of teachers of color, and we've created a program spearheaded by our superintendent for young men of color in particular, because that's what's really the most struggling community. And I think it's not a good strategy if you don't target the people that are struggling the most. So we've gone down that road. And over the last 3 years since I've been on the school board, we have cut the gap, the achievement gap and the graduation rate gap between white students, Black students, and their Asian counterparts as well. And it's almost equaled out completely. That doesn't necessarily speak to what the true college preparedness is, but some of these tangible things that we can measure. But I want to throw one more thing out. When it comes to gifted and talented students in their assessment, what we did was we stepped away from balancing it against the national average, and we go to a per school basis. So when students are performing their butt off in this school, they can be in gifted and talented in this school. They may not be as high versus the national average, but our district isn't performing that high against the national average, right? So let's be realistic, and let's talk about what we're doing with the resources and the staff and talent that we have. And we've increased Black, Brown, gifted and talented students and IB and AP students, not exponentially, but quite a bit.
I want to say, Kevin, I want to applaud you on those efforts. I was talking to a principal in Cherry Creek the other day, and their students were able to come back, and there were, when students come back, they're going to be energetic. They haven't seen each other. They're going, you know how kids are, and he's at a middle school, and he said that, he told his teachers, don't send referrals to my office. Deal with it in the classroom, and not only deal with it, don't deal with it in a way that's punitive. Deal with it in a way where you can engage the student. That's why it's not just having teachers of color in the classroom, it's also having deans of color, principals of color, directors of color, superintendents of color, because they do bring a different lens to discipline. They bring a different lens, and in some cases, their lived experience to the classroom, which makes a difference when it comes to assessing a student to see if they need to be in gifted and talented, if they need to be in a college prep program, or if they want to go in to a trade program. It just brings a different lens and brings a different motivation to the students.
Yeah. I like what Jan Wilson had to say. And she said in 10 years of teaching in the juvenile correction system, she found 0 students who didn't want to learn and work hard when they were taught with individual prescriptions that brought success. Most had failed in public school, and that speaks volumes.
Absolutely. And then what's the definition of fail? I like that failed was in quotation marks. I think that we fail our students. I don't think our students fail us. That everybody learns differently, and it's our job to figure it out, and it's our job to help them succeed, to get to where they need to be. And if it's not through us, then it needs to be through someone else, and we need to get them to where they need to be to get those resources, and they shouldn't fail.
We as a society, or we as an educator?
Me as a school district, at least,
School district.
you know, I'm not an educator, and I know that's a hard job. I don't know how they do it. I don't think they're compensated well enough. I don't think they get good enough benefits. I think their job is long and their day is longer than people think. They go home and do all kinds of more homework than the students. But it's our job as an entity, as a school board, as a school district, as a society at large, to not fail our students. Our students can't fail us. They're our kids. If we go back to the days before there were schoolhouses, it was just parents. Could you say your son failed you? Right. It's your son. Could you say your daughter failed you? That's your daughter. That's your seed. That's you.
Well, you touched on this a while back when we first came on, and you talked about how we're such a proud nation, and we believe that America is the greatest nation on earth, and a great nation would never want to see any student fail or be ignorant or not educated. When you have so many, when you're where we stand on the national stage as far as literacy, could we really call ourselves the greatest nation in the world?
Greatest.
Right. Greatest.
Highest incarceration rate per capita. Greatest nation.
Guns per capita.
They're exceptional, or call themselves exceptional.
Right. Pat ourselves on the back way too much.
I think if I heard the question correctly, and I could be wrong, whose responsibility is it to teach our kids? Who's the responsibility to educate our kids? I believe, yes, the school district and the schools and the teachers play a part, but I also think that we need to turn our homes into universities.
Yes, sir.
Turn our homes into learning entities. And I'm not putting blame on anyone. I don't want that comment to be taken as blame. But we need to, even when our kids are on the phone, how do you turn the phone into a learning tool? How do you turn the video games that they're playing into a learning tool? Everything around them, you don't need to have a lot of money to learn, to teach, to turn your house into what I call a university. And I think we need to teach our parents and engage our parents in that way, so that when they go home, there's not that gap between that learning decrease between going home and coming back to school the next day. We talk about that gap in the summer, but sometimes it's day to day. You went to school, you learned all this stuff, but there's no reinforcement once they get home. And not in all cases, but in some cases.
My favorite movie that I've unearthed is Ever After with Drew Barrymore, and she said there's a profound statement that she makes in that movie about the king and being subject to the king and his rules. And she says, if you suffer your people to be ill-educated and ill-prepared from birth, and then you punish them for those of which their first she says, if you suffer your people to be ill-educated and their manners corrupted from birth, and then you punish them for which their first teachings taught them, what can be deduced is that you first make criminals and then you punish them. We are making a criminal society, and then we punish them for what they were taught from the very beginning.
It's profound.
Who was the teacher that inspired you? What was what inspired your experience in school to keep you going through? Was it a teacher? Was it a fellow student? Was it a principal? Was it a coach? Who inspired you?
Me, personally?
Either one of y'all.
Kevin, I'll let you take that.
I had a lot of teachers that inspired me. My art teacher in the 9th and 10th grade inspired me quite a bit. And he wouldn't encourage me too much, because you know how us boys do when we're teenagers. You get encouraged too much, you think someone's telling you what to do. But what he would do is he would see me just halfway work on some art, and he would take that and put it into a contest, because it would usually be good enough to almost place, and that was when I wasn't trying. So I knew in the back of my head, no matter what, my art was going to be in a contest. So sometimes I'm all right, let me go ahead and put a little Kevin Cox on it. You know what I mean? And just do it. But it inspired me to stay focused on my art, because I was starting to just draw back and just get through the day and whatnot if I didn't skip, right? So he inspired me quite a bit to stick with my art, and actually encouraged me to go to AP art, which you had to like apply for. I didn't believe that I could do it because, I don't know, just second guessing yourself. And he actually convinced me, and so he inspired me quite a lot. Mr. Battle, is a good teacher that inspired me a lot.
I have to be truly, truly honest with you, and I cannot say that my inspiration came from a teacher, and I that's sad to say, but it's true. I went to a parochial school for K through 6, and then I went through Aurora Public Schools after that till high school, and it was not a great experience. It was not a great experience. There were very few Black teachers. We met with resistance to white principals that were very mean, and you kind of can, if you didn't play basketball or were a sport or of interest to them, you just kind of washed out of the system. You were ignored. It took, I would say my inspiration came from my mother, who with 4 kids, and my father was in the military, so he was, traveling a lot. My mother put herself, while she was raising 4 kids, put herself through college and got her bachelor's degree as an engineer. And to me, that was amazing. And she shared stories of how her instructors, even, she did African American studies, and it was a white man who was teaching it. So can you imagine how she bumped heads with him? But that would be my inspiration, but I can tell you this, even with all the educators that I came up against, it didn't crush me. And I think that that's what they were trying to do, but it didn't crush me because I saw my mother, who was, like I said, putting herself through college and getting her bachelor's degree. So I knew that we had to fight and keep going. So I felt like they were trying to crush me, but it didn't work.
And the reason why I asked that question, I'll dive into mine as well, is because sometimes we talk about a lot of the deficit models in education, but there has been some successes. There has been some wins. Every year we look at the graduation pictures. We see the graduation videos. You see the stories coming out of West Point, Harvard, or HBCUs. When you hear those phenomenal speeches from those students, hear them going to law school, medical school, and all these different things. And for me, I think also we need to celebrate our success and not be ashamed of celebrating our success. Yeah. So for me, mine was my mother and my father. My father was a college professor. My mother was a bus driver. My mother had to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. And she said, "You getting up with me?" And, so I had to be up at 4 o'clock in the morning. And my grandmother, who had no more than an 8th grade education, would read the newspaper every single day, backwards and forward. Those were my first teachers. She knew everything that was going on in this country and in this city, from the stock market to politics to local affairs. She knew every single thing that was going on. And that's what inspired me to learn. I wasn't the best student, but that was the foundation that got me through school.
A certain someone, Michael Carter again, asked a profound question there. Can a white person teach African American studies?
Right. To African Americans, like my mother and talks about the stories of how they butt heads continuously because he wanted to talk about the Black experience. Not to say that he couldn't, but when somebody who's Black is telling you about the Black experience, why would you challenge them on that?
I mean, I know that a white person can be just as educated on what's written in the textbooks and in the historical documents, and they can watch the same videos as a Black person, but they can live the Black life and understand the reality or the checks and balances you have to put on what's been written. Because we just talked about the whitewashing of history. We just talked about the unpaid migrant workers, right? And, we just talked about that. So what if they take a few of those things to heart because they just believed what was written, and they didn't know to put that little check and balance on that, but also, I think the answer is yes, a white person can teach, African American studies. I also think it's more difficult for a white person to fully grasp, the true concepts within African American studies than it is for a Black person. But it also kind of calls back to what Croy Thompson put on, saying there's been studies showing that significant increase in grades for Black students when they have Black teachers and Black people in administrative positions. It's less received by Black people when you talk about the Black experience when it's not from a Black person. I'm sure white people don't recognize this because the massive majority of educators are white, right? This is going to be it's going to be a blind spot.
I think, as a person that teach in that field and have a father that taught in that field, I think there's what you call the dissemination of information. And then there's the dissemination of information with lived experience, two different things. The dissemination of information can be done. And depending on the intent of that instructor can be white and probably do a great job, especially if there's no one else in the school talking about this. Suppose you have a predominantly white staff of teachers and no one talks about diversity within their classroom, but this one instructor. That instructor may be a lifeline to those kids of color who are not hearing themselves in the curriculum or in the academy for that particular school. So I say there's the dissemination of information, and depending on the instructor's intent, they could do a decent job. But yes, the preference would be a person from that background with the academic as well as lived experience.
I want to make a call back to a gentleman that was on our show about maybe 6 months ago or so, Charles Lensmeyer, who works for a textbook publishing company. And he talked about the lack of diversity in authors to be quoted in textbooks for college, right? So even if you are educated, from the textbook, who wrote that work? Who wrote that information?
Good point. Yeah, right?
Yeah.
I just quoted Utopia, and who wrote that, right? Yeah. I completely agree with you. Who wrote that they're disseminating the information? That's a good question.
You're just disseminating it.
But there's pushback on Black authors. Malefe Asante, Dr. Maulana Karenga wrote one of the textbooks, Black Studies. Who's using that textbook? And who's using that textbook? Nikki Giovanni has done a lot of writings. I mean, there's a lot of authors out there, even contemporary authors. You got brother Rashidi out there at Boulder, who's done like a 2 or 3 series books on W.E.B. Du Bois that can also be used at the high school level. I truly think that there's been a lot of pushback on Black authors because they write from not just the academic perspective, but also the lived experience. And it ends up getting caught in this argument of critical race theory. If their lived experience has been that they have been discriminated against based on their race, and they put it in the book, that's their lived experience. That's just what it is. It has nothing to do with critical race theory. It has to deal with the day-to-day life of a person of color or a day-to-day life of the Black person that wrote and put pen to paper to that book, along with the academic research that has been peer-reviewed and has shown it has lived up to the standard of any other scholar that has published.
Professor, from a Black professor.
you got plenty of authors out there who has done fabulous work. Jawanza Kinjufu been talking about the Black males for I don't know how long, about the counter conspiracy to destroy Black males in education. He wrote the series in the late 70s going into the 80s.
But they're not widely used.
Not widely used.
No dissemination coming from those.
If they had been using those books to train teachers early on, we probably wouldn't be in some of the situations we are today.
Agreed. You wouldn't hear somebody say, why don't they just comply? They can't possibly be scared for their life. They're breathing. They're screaming.
I got go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. I just said wow. I just needed to emote for a second there. Go ahead, Omar.
No, the only thing I'm saying is that some kids don't even know about Black studies until they get to college. Some of them don't know about the history until they get to college. Some of them may not even experience a Black teacher. When I was teaching at Metro, some of them said, "You're my first Black instructor."
Wow. Here in Colorado.
Here in Colorado, you're my first Black instructor, period. When I teach at CU Denver, some of them say, "You're my first Black instructor here at the university." So that doesn't mean that there isn't Black instructors, because there's some phenomenal Black instructors. Dr. Rachel Harding is doing phenomenal work over at CU Denver, and M. Pondy, who's the chair of the Africana Studies at Metro, all doing phenomenal work. But is there work transitioning to the high schools? Is there work transitioning to the middle schools? Is there work transitioning to the elementary schools, where they know that people look like them are not just people who wrote books, but are scholars that are well respected?
Yeah.
Omar, where can we find these books?
Man, I'm gonna tell you right now. Oswan Bookstore out there in Los Angeles, California. They're on Amazon. I don't mind even putting a list of books together that, you know, that the community can read, that the community can go to. We probably should have some of these professors on our show so they can talk about some of their work. While people are talking about genealogy, Professor Dennis Green, I forget his wife's name, his wife has been doing genealogy before 23andMe, talking about African ancestry and tracing the genes and all that other stuff long before 23andMe. Lives right here in Denver, Colorado. Has anybody talked to her about this science? No.
We need her on the show for sure.
We gotta get her. We gotta get her. And you know what, Omar? You make me think we ought to start a book club, man. We ought to just start a book club and just do some reading to come on and talk about it. John Ronquillo just bigging you up. Omar is right. Number Black faculty at CU Denver on 2 hands, working hard to change that. Good Lord, that's a good idea, man. I need to see a list though. I do need to see a list because I'm interested in reading up on some of this stuff.
And I'm gonna do a shameless plug. My brother, my baby brother, who's a principal in Los Angeles, California, just wrote a book called Revolutionary Education. I think we could start with that book because what he's doing is teaching principals and administrators that you can be revolutionary even as an administrator to make sure that our kids get the best education possible.
Yeah. 100%. And I think we need that right about now when they're trying to make laws that change what is taught in schools concerning race.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Wow. What's the name of the class you've been instructing, Omar?
The class I'm teaching in the fall, if we meet the count, will be politics in the Black community. And I think you was on there last year, Kevin. Wasn't you on? It was funny because I asked Kevin. Kevin said, "I'm gonna be in your class." I'm
gonna have to sign up for that class just because.
I mean, hey, look, I didn't finish college, so yeah, it was big.
But you're an educator.
Yeah, and I was an educator, right? That was huge. Omar, you're phenomenal. Are we ready to have a conversation of racism in academia? Omar, you want to have that conversation? That's going
to take a whole show.
We need to have it. We live it. I mean, when we talk about racism in general and racism in higher ed, racism in preschool, racism in before from birth, racism impacts our life every single day.
Every day.
The question is, how do we not let us keep us from moving where we got to go? How do we not let it keep us from having tenured professors at the University of Colorado, Denver? We got a bunch of brothers and sisters that are junior professors. We need them to become tenured. But there's as CU Denver sits right smack in the middle of downtown Denver, and I only remember 1 or 2 full professors. Full professor means you didn't reach the limit of what you can be as a professor outside of going into an administrator. Only 1 or 2 Black full professors the whole time I was there, 18 years. So what we have to do is, 1, support our professors that are publishing, buy their work, have them on programs like this so that people can support them and that students take their classes and go from there, brother. We got some scholars right here in Denver, Colorado that's kicking butt.
We do. One of them's on the show today. You know what I mean? One of them's on the show, but I'm going to hold your feet to the fire on that list. We need that. We need that book list. We need a reading list.
We do.
So we can just get started on educating ourselves. I mean, speaking for myself, I need to be more educated on this. Just these animated conversations with you, Omar. I feel educated every time, but it's not enough. I need a reading list. So we're going to make sure we provide that to the community and whatnot. So, look. What's up? What else is going on out here that we need to just make sure we talk about before we get to some dope black thoughts?
The Lakers lost.
Right. Right. Who's happy about that?
I wasn't keeping up, man. What happened?
I say this. I hope the Nuggets pull it off, but right now, I'm a little heartbroken about them Lakers.
Yeah, the Nuggets sent Carmelo Anthony home, so that's good. But we need to make it out of that second bracket. But I'm a little upset about the Lakers going home too. In six, it didn't even go Game 7.
That game was over when that series was over when they lost by 40 the game before.
Yeah.
People kept saying, "Well, LeBron." I said, "I'm a big fan of LeBron." And he was like, that's his game plan. His psychology. Now, losing by 40 wasn't in the game plan.
If it was, it didn't work this time. And I'm a huge fan of LeBron too. I have more of a player love than I did have a team love, and LeBron's my dude.
Opened up a school, right?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, he did. I can't remember the name of it, but yeah, he did some great things, educational.
In his hometown, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, and also with Kaepernick as well. What?
Colin Kaepernick opened up a school, right?
Yeah, these are black names that we should be celebrating. Colin Kaepernick, Oprah Winfrey. I mean, she overseas or here, she's in education.
People are critical of Steve Harvey, but he does a lot of work with young black males, especially through that great fraternity called Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. Mm-hmm. He does a lot of work with the youth and through the fraternity. I think we sometimes underscore what some of these professional athletes do, what some of these entertainers do. I mean, people used to be very hard on Tyler Perry and talking about, well, he dressed up like a woman, he did this, he did that. Name someone else who has a sound stage where the different buildings are named after historical icons who sacrificed their lives to open up doors of opportunities for black actors and actresses.
Right.
So sometimes as we're criticizing, you need to begin to also look at the work that they do for the community.
Right. And Tyler Perry has come a long way. I mean, who else has rivaled Hollywood, who's been in power for so long? Mm-hmm. So, that was the only place that you could go to make some top-notch movies. And now we have one, and it's built by a black man. Another studio, that's a pat on the back within itself.
And I'm gonna put it back up here. Corey made a good point. He said LeBron James has been a pillar with no off-field issues, but yet there's still hate on him. And if there was anything they could make a controversy with, it would be everywhere. We know from our personal community here in the Denver area, if they can find any way to tear you down, they're going to do it, and it's going to be amplified by 100.
Well, the moment he started standing up for the black boys, they started trying to tear him down. Colin Kaepernick caught it. He caught it. The moment he started using his platform for injustice to bring light to the injustices, social injustice, they started tearing him down.
Well, I got to say this. We got to uphold those sisters in the WNBA because they came out strong during the 2020 protests. Sometimes they don't get the recognition that they deserve, but they put their careers on the line, making not even a quarter of what the men make. And they all came out in BLM shirts. Some of them were even active at the protest. There was one of the sisters who actually stopped playing basketball to work on the case of a brother that was wrongly convicted. These are the things that athletes are doing. They're taking their money, giving it back to the community, and sometimes we expect them to be all places at all times. Hey, I applaud them for the work that they're doing, And I'm happy that they're giving back outside of just the traditional things that they are supposed to give to. They're going above and beyond, and I appreciate it.
What do you say to the person who says to them, "Shut up and just play ball"?
Shut up and dribble.
Yeah, shut up and dribble. You shouldn't be able to say anything. You shouldn't have a voice.
I'm gonna say that, you know, if it wasn't for the Jim Browns, if it wasn't for the Kareem Abdul-Jabbars, if it wasn't for those, I mean, you have to understand, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar graduated from UCLA during the time when it wasn't that many blacks, and UCLA is considered one of the top schools in the state of California. I say that to say that not only did he dribble, he also is an academic, has also published books, and is also a scholar. So a lot of these athletes, LeBron James didn't go to college, but you talk to LeBron James, he is super intelligent. Kobe Bryant spoke like 3-4 different languages and was fluent in them. So let's not sit up here and say that these were people who just dribbled the ball. These were people who were scholars.
Let's go back to the WNBA. Some of these women were going against directly their own owner of their team. I mean, they're literally putting their career on the line. You know, a lot of people say, "Oh, why don't you put up your money? Colin Kaepernick has this much money from such and such." These women were making, like you said, Stefania, a quarter of what the men are making sometimes, and they're willing to go toe to toe, and they're laying it all out there, and they're working just as hard. Whether or not they're bringing in as much money, they're working just as hard.
And I say that they're living the Black experience. They have every right to make their voice heard about what they are living. You know, and especially when somebody they encounter somebody who says, "Shut up and just dribble." Come on, that's exactly why they're talking out. That's exactly what they're using. Why they're using their platform to make social injustice part of the conversation in America today.
Yeah, they don't say that to Tim Tebow or Brett Favre.
Who was the first one to kneel during the national anthem because he said he could not support a country who would allow abortions. He kneeled during the national anthem for that. Nobody said anything.
Well, I got to say this. Someone brought up that Bill Russell. Bill Russell was one of the first black head. He was a player coach with the Boston Celtics, I believe, and I think was the first black head coach or one of the first black head coaches in the NBA. And Bill Russell has really participated in protests. I mean, Bill Russell has a history of fighting for civil rights. Also, let's begin to look at just our high school students. How many of our high school students were enlightened that was wearing BLM shirts, that were out there getting their white teammates to stand with them and to be with them during this whole process? The women in the WNBA, it wasn't just our black women or women of color. It was also some of our white allies that stood with them and put their careers on the line. So, I say that 2020 has opened up our eyes to a lot of different experiences and opportunities, which is why I say, let's not always speak from a deficit model. Let's look at some of the successes and gains that have taken place and begin to build on them and not just think about all the failures. We still got to address them, don't get me wrong, but we have made some progress.
Yeah. History is history.
Absolutely.
100% right about that. There's a disconnect with folks.
Well, the information...
There's a disconnect. I definitely agree with that. Hey, Kevin, how's the studio looking?
Man, the studio's looking phenomenal, man. You know, it's good to not have that sun coming right through the blinds at us, but you know, it's looking good. I mean, when you gonna come up here, Omar?
Hey, you know what? Now that I'm off vacation, now that I didn't reach that 50 mark, you know, I'm enlightened. I got a bunch of new energy.
Oh. You looking well rested?
Well, I went to California, and that's where I was able to read that National Geographic article. The Economist is a magazine that has an article on race. People are fascinated about this discussion with race, but it shouldn't just be a discussion. It should be, what are we going to do about it? Yeah. Are we going to do like that suburb out of Chicago, where they're out there saying, hey, we owe reparations to those who that are still living, that are descendants of slaves, or those that were traumatized during the time of Jim Crow. I think it's Evanston or something like that out there in Chicago. Or I think San Diego has what you call a plan for Black residents that live in San Diego. These are the types of things that we need to take this race conversation to the next level.
Yeah. And to me, that's a dope Black thought. So I'm going to just echo that as my dope Black thought. We're not going to spend all our time pointing at problems. We want to switch the conversation to what should we do? I think reparations is a major conversation. That's something that we should do. We should repair or make whole part of this Black community, because so many other communities point to our community and say, they're broken. This is what's wrong. They have a broken home. Their family structure isn't what we would say it should be. How can you help us make it whole? Let's not just point at problems. Let's talk about these solutions.
My dope Black thought is, how do you celebrate Juneteenth but criminalize the homeless? If you understood anything about Juneteenth, following following Reconstruction, and it took a couple of years for Texas to get the word, when them people left those slave plantations, many of them were homeless. Many of them didn't have jobs. Some of them had to go back to their slave master in order to just have a place to live. So when we talk about our unhoused communities, let's not criminalize them. Let's figure out a way to treat them with dignity so that they can get on their feet, so that they can take care of their families and reinvest back in our cities to be a bridge builder to those who are coming up behind them.
Yep.
That's good.
Stefan, you got something?
I say, we can't move forward unless we know where we're coming from and where we've been, and trying to hide and change our history, that we can't stand for that. Black history is history, and we need to acknowledge that. We need to recognize it. They need to learn about it. America needs to learn about it, and we need to move on and together as a people.
Look here, ladies and gentlemen, those are some dope Black thoughts right there. I appreciate everybody for tuning in.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. It was good seeing both of y'all.
Yeah,
good seeing y'all too. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
What is love? Is the drug. Let it rotate, just to hit back in it. Calling me an Uber just to hit back in it. Use the cash app like pay, I spend it. Is it really worth the wait? I don't get it.